So let's officially start mobile era, and let's give a round of applause to Maximiliano.
Okay. Thank you. Hi, good morning. How are you? Ready for a good day? Cool. So my name is Maximiliano. I can go by Max. I know it's a long name. So let me start quickly introducing myself. So I'm a mobile web developer. I have started doing web development since that browser, so a long time ago, 1995. I'm from Argentina. I'm based on a plane, but my home is in Buenos Aires, and I've been to 66 countries so far. I have authored a couple of books with a lot of translations on languages that I don't really understand, and the latest one are about the mobile web. So regarding the things that we will cover today. Also, you can find content on several providers. And I want to tell you first, I want to start with this, that when I started, okay, in 1995, everything was very different. So from the browsing experience, it was just like that. That was my first website browsing experience from where we were storing our websites, okay? And there were no tutorials, no video platforms, no online video platform to learn or to see how to create some apps. No Stack Overflow, okay? Can you imagine that? No, it wasn't there. Not even Google, okay? Not even Google at that time. So and when 2000 was starting, okay, and the end of the war was near, basically I started doing mobile, okay? So think about a mobile device in around 2000. 2001. So I'm talking about pre-iPhone, pre-Android. So I started doing WML, then I moved into Palm, then J2ME. I did a lot of games and apps in Java ME or J2ME at the time. Then I did Symbian apps, BlackBerry 10, that was different, of course. That thing, Windows CE. Then Nokia CS40. Remember Nokia? Yeah, it's back, but that's a different Nokia. The first iPhone, I started doing web apps and then native apps for the iPhone. Palm with WebOS. So I also did some apps for WebOS. That's one of the first Android devices with original Java. Then Windows Phone. Of course, continuing with Nokia. I'm not sure if you remember that one. That's Migo. Okay, Nokia N9. I have like 3 or 4 at home if you want one. So then Windows Phone, or then Windows 10. And you can imagine that after a while, I ended up, that was a picture I took 10 years ago at home, okay, 10 years ago. So I need to take a new one, but I think I will need a stair or something to take the picture. So imagine how many SDKs, how many languages I've been working with on the mobile space, both on the native side and also on the mobile web side. So I've been working on both sides for mostly all the platforms. So since that, I feel like this guy, Socrates, that said this, that in Latin means, I only know that I know nothing. So that's like a feeling that I always have in this field. Like every time you are expert in one particular platform or SDK or framework, everything is changing. So then you know nothing again. So that's a feeling that exists in this area. And I want to tell you, like, my first advice to you is that you need to embrace the change. Okay? You need to embrace the change. And always have a critical eye, because everything is going to change. The company that you are like fan of will disappear probably, or will be acquired by a different one, and everything that you have learned will change. So don't get frustrated when that happens, because that's normal, okay, and it will continue happening. So just to give you an idea, I also created that for the Google Glass, okay? Remember that one? It's still here, but of course with a different approach. And talking about the Google Glass, just to give you a quick parenthesis here, I've been doing some talks on Google Glass development a few years ago. You can see it says stock photo there. So some photographer took me a picture, and he sold the picture, basically without my permission, by the way. So be careful, cameraman. Don't take a picture of me. And basically, of course, it appears in the press, which is fine, because that article was talking about my talk, but then my face appeared everywhere regarding Google Glass, okay, including things like this, like it seems like the FBI interrogated me, or that you need to be careful of myself, right, because I can just know your personal details just looking at you, or things like, are you a glass hole? That was Yahoo Tech, but fortunately, it seems like I'm actually a nice guy, not a glass hole. Even things like this. Okay? So everything is changing always. Okay, so just don't be careful when you are wearing one of these devices. That's like my second advice here. But going back to the modern mobile, okay, and talking about our main focus today here, that is PWAs. So there are a lot of frustrations usually in the mobile space, okay, that here in this room, also in the other room, so talking about native, talking about the web, when you see the press or you see reports saying, for example, that the web is dying, okay, or for example, that apps are dying, and after a while you see, well, apps are not dying, or the web is actually not dying. So, and you see this all the time. Okay, there is, of course, an ongoing discussion that I'm not sure I will ever have any answer. But that native versus web is still a thing. Okay, and PWA is here to give some more fire to that discussion. So 3 years ago, we have started talking about this thing known as PWAs. So one definition that I can give you on PWAs, okay, on progressive web apps, just in case you haven't heard about the term, and you are here just for the best coffee in the world. So it can be an innovative new way to create applications for mobile devices. You write apps that look and behave exactly like apps on the phone. Just put it on an internet server. That feels like a definition for PWA 3 years ago. But I'm lying, because for instant distribution, easy to update, all these definitions were defined 11 years ago by Steve Jobs. Okay, so it was WWDC 07, and he was talking about how to create apps for the original iPhone. Okay, I'm talking about before the App Store. So he was saying, oh, to develop apps for the iPhone, we're going to use an innovative new way to create mobile applications, that Web 2.0 and Ajax. Okay, so I'm just saying that this is not new. In fact, I've been creating this kind of apps for a while now, even before the iPhone. So I've been doing PWAs before even the term appeared in the market. So because no SDK was required, so we were not talking about native apps. And it's not just iOS. 19 years ago, Microsoft created something known as HTML applications, HTAs. Okay, that if you look at Wikipedia, it even says that that technology is actually patented by Microsoft. Well, now maybe it's in the open source community, I don't know. But we are just recycling the same idea of creating multi-platform apps using web technologies. So, but this year, basically, is the year of progressive web apps. There are several things that have happened this year that means this is the year of progressive web apps. So I like this cover of Net Magazine. I wrote the article, but I like the design. I like the idea of the DNA, because the PWA is just the new DNA or the current DNA of the web. We are just talking about the web platform. Okay, we have a new term, but we are just talking about the web platform that now can create app-like experiences, wherever that means, by the way. So PWA is ideal for all those apps that are just consuming web services or web content. So if you are creating apps that are just downloading JSON files and rendering those JSON files on the screen, you're basically creating a browser, like a custom browser for your content. That doesn't make too much sense at one point. So it's a lot of effort that doesn't really need, like, let's say, a native app. So there are a lot of experiences today, for example, VR experiences, or other experiences that are just webby, that there currently needs an app, or they are trying to sell you an app. Okay, I'm pretty sure you saw this, like you receive a LinkedIn contact, you click on the email and say, I want to accept this. if it's not a recruiter probably, and you accept that contact, and then the website is trying to kick you out of that website. Say, get out of here, I don't want you. Go to my app. But you say, I'm here, I want to just do my stuff right now. I want to read this, or I want to do this. I don't want to download a 132 megabytes app. And I mentioned that I'm traveling a lot, so I'm usually using a lot of services from apps. For example, in this case, a lot of oils from Ukraine. And of course, I need an app to translate that. The question is, do I really need a native app for that? Isn't it possible for a web app? Like it's just something that I will use for a minute, and that's all? That I don't really need like to have 100, 200, 300 megabytes on my phone for an app that I will use maybe once in a year. So another example is airport apps. So if I've been in 90 airports in the last 5 years, do I need 90 apps? Okay, so it doesn't make too much sense. So I ended up usually with a lot of apps that wants updates all the time, every week. Like a couple of gigabytes needs to be downloaded if you enable auto updates. So another example there is Serbia. That was 10 days ago. So when I got into the flight, they were saying, oh, you need Wi-Fi, so you need to connect to the Wi-Fi. You can get with your own device entertainment, so TV shows or movies. So you say, oh, cool. But then you realize that you need an app. And of course, if you are already in the plane, you need actual internet access, not just the Wi-Fi into the local server. So I need to buy the internet access. And when you look at the prices, you say, okay, it's like €3 for 10 megabytes, €5 for 20. And which plan should I use? I don't know. I don't know the free app the data is going to use. Even if I try to get information, the app was originally for iOS 16 megabytes, the native app. So is 20 megabytes data plan enough? I don't know, because when I get connected, a lot of apps are trying to also download data, so it will be enough. I don't know. And even if I pay it, there is a problem. At one point, you realize that the app was removed from the App Store, so it's not actually there. Okay, so and that makes me always thinking. So why are we doing this? So is there any technical reason today that you needed a native app for this? Not really. Even with DRM now with WebAssembly, you can solve the problem. So we don't actually need a native app to just watch a movie in a plane. If there is a web server there up and running inside the plane, I don't need a native app for doing that. But why are we doing this? So the native ecosystem is broken for many apps. I'm not saying that it's broken for all the apps, but there are a lot of apps. There are a lot of use cases where the native world, it's not really working. So it's just frustrating users because you can't actually use it, or it's using a lot of space on your phone, or you will just don't download the app. So you are not using the app anyway. So that's why we are talking about PWAs today. So I'm going to start talking about the state of a platform before actually giving you some tips and tricks that are sometimes unknown, sometimes are known, but are needed for creating a really good user experience. So first, every web browser is supporting PWAs, but it's kind of, yeah, when we're talking about, okay, where PWAs are supported, we want to know where can we install an app and it has a standalone full screen experience that can even work offline. So in that case, this is how it looks like today. In mobile operating systems, it's available on Android, mostly all the browsers, including Edge, on Android. On iOS, let's say for now that it's working on iOS since 11.3. And also kaiOS and Geo is basically brand using kaiOS. These are feature phones that also can support PWAs only from the store. So you need to go to a store and download apps. And every app in that store is basically a PWA with some changes, but it's a PWA. We need to be very careful with social network browsing. When we are browsing the web from Facebook, you are clicking on a link on Facebook or Instagram, typically you are browsing the web within an in-app browser. It's not actually the browser in your phone. And on those browsers or in-app browsers, you don't have support for PWAs, or at least full support. So if you have never seen this in action, for example, on Android, you go to a website like Financial Times, and then you can install the experience manually or with some banners or badges that appear. So you select Add to Home Screen, and that basically is installing an app. And it's an async operation. I will explain why in a minute. And after a while, a couple of seconds, your app is installed. It appears in the home screen as the Financial Times app, but it's also in the launcher as any other Android app. Also, it looks as a standalone app, so that it's completely outside of the browser at this point. It looks like a Financial Times app. Even if you go to settings and you search for the list of your installed apps, Financial Times appears there. Okay, with battery usage, with space, like any other app. In fact, it even says that it's installed from the Play Store, but it's completely false because it's not in the Play Store. So on iOS, it's similar. I'm not sure if you have ever heard about the website known as Tinder. Probably not, right? But if you go to Tinder, Tinder is a PWA, and then you can install Tinder from iOS, in this case, Safari. You select the action sheet, add to home screen, and it's adding an icon. Probably you are thinking, hey, Max, that's just a shortcut to the website. But it's kind of, because when you open that app, it's now a full screen experience, and from an OS point of view, it looks like any app. So that's mobile. That's probably the well-known support. But now, we also have support on desktop. So this is the current support. We have support on Chromebooks, Windows 10, Windows 7 and 8 using Chrome 70. On the Microsoft Store on Windows 10, you can also download PWAs. And on macOS, it's coming with a flag. So let me show you this in action really quickly. So this is my Chromebook. So I'm on twitter.com. I'm still in the website, but not sure why it's paused. Let's try again. So I'm in twitter.com, so you can see the URL bar. And you can install it from the menu. So you select Install Twitter. And you can see the wording says install. It's different from mobile that says add to home screen. And then I have a window, like a standalone window that I can resize. It looks like any other app in the system. Okay, and I can open as many PWAs as I want at the same time. And of course, each PWA looks like any other app in this case, Chrome OS. So remember Flappy Birds? That's a PWA version of Flappy Birds. Also available for all the platforms. Yeah, I'm not good at that one. So you have a nice menu that where you can see, for example, information about the TLS certificate, because we don't want phishing here or something like that. And on Windows 10, it looks similar. So in this case, I'm in Trivago. That's another PWA. Chrome on Windows. You install Trivago, and then you have a completely Windows app with its own window. It also appears in the start screen or start menu, depends on the version of Windows, as any other app. So you will find Trivago there. Okay, so that's available today in a stable without any flag if you have Chrome 70. And the same happens on Windows 7 or Windows 8, okay, using Chrome, and also Linux. It's currently available. So you can actually install these apps directly. On macOS, it's available under flag, and it's going to be ready in around January in 2 versions of Chrome. It's currently under flags. If you go to Chrome flags and enable desktop PWAs, you can see how I have installed here the Starbucks PWA on my Mac. And then it looks like any other app in the Mac. So there are no support, of course, on some old browsers, and no plans, or public plans at least, from some platforms. Of course, we have all the problems on web view-based browsers. Okay, on iOS, we have a lot of web view-based browsers, such as Chrome on iOS or Facebook. There are no words on Firefox or Opera on desktop, as well as Safari on the Mac. So it's not clear if we will have support for installation or not in the future. Also, there are no public support for smart TVs, consoles, or VR headsets. I think it's a good target for PWAs, regarding some exceptions on Microsoft-based, Windows 10-based devices. But today, installation support is pretty good. Exactly 50% of the users that are currently browsing the web, both on desktop and mobile, are currently able to install a PWA and have a standalone experience. In a few weeks, so after the auto update of Chrome, it will be 70%. So that 20% difference is people currently on Windows or Linux on Chrome 69, that they will get the update to Chrome 70 in the next few days or weeks. Okay, so in a few weeks it will be 70. And in February, with macOS support on Chrome, it will be 75% of all the users browsing the web. They will be able to have full support for PWAs. Of course, the rest, the 25% rest, is still they will still be able to use your app, but within the browser, within the boundaries of the browser, and maybe not offline, like a normal website. And if you just take mobile, it's today currently 96% of users that are actually browsing the web from a mobile device are able to download and install a PWA. The problem is that to create a successful experience, we need to uncover some secrets, okay? Because it's not so simple. So let's start talking about the installation process. Because one of the issues that we have is that users might not know how to install these apps or how this works. This is still new from a user's point of view. So also we have a problem today in the market in terms of the wording that we are using. Is it add or install? On desktop, Chrome is using install. On mobile, all the browsers are using add to home screen, even if the actual thing that is happening is not actually adding to home screen. It's actually installing an app. Also, there is something called batching, and I will show you in a minute. So we have a problem of differences in different browsers. On Chrome, you can see it's add to home screen. Okay. Also, Chrome will show you a little info bar at the bottom when you are browsing a PWA. You can say it says add the name of the PWA to the home screen. Then we have Samsung Internet Browser using that little badge icon at the top when you are in a PWA. On Opera, it says home screen, not even a verb. Then Firefox, it's using also that icon when you are in a PWA, so you can actually install the app. Edge is using add to home screen. Also, Chrome has announced that in the future, that info bar that you saw before will be replaced by an icon in the URL bar, like a badge. And the same will happen on Edge on Windows in the future. So the problem is that we have so many badges and action names for the same operation, which means that can be a problem for your users. So we need to do an extra effort today to try to educate the users in how to install these apps. Also, today, on most platforms, not all of them, but on most platforms, you can create your own install button. So within your own UI, you can have a button or a menu item or something that will trigger the installation dialog. To do that, it's a little tricky, but you need to listen for an event before install prompt. And when you listen to that event, you enable the button at that point. So if that event is happening, it means that you are ready to show that dialog. So you usually prevent default, and you need to save the argument for later usage. You are going to use that install prompt variable later when the user is clicking on the button. So that's roughly how it works. So there are a couple of events also that you can bind to if you want to get analytics to know if the user has actually installed the app or not, if it's accepted the dialog or discarded the dialog. Talking about the user interface, there are sometimes some issues. For example, when you are in a website, you know that on Chrome you have the pull to refresh gesture, which sometimes is fine, but when you are creating an app, sometimes it might be having some problems with your own gestures. Okay, so that's why you have a way today in CSS to disable that gesture if you don't want the gesture in your app. Okay, so it's just over scroll behavior Y. I'm not saying you need to use this all the time. Just think about it, and maybe on some apps you need to disable the auto refresh. I've seen that as a user, that I want to do something, and instead of doing what I want, it's refreshing the whole app. Okay, and it's frustrating from a user's point of view. So also, there is a problem problem with translation, mostly if you already have your own translation mechanism. So when the PWA is in a different language than your current phone, so Chrome, when you're using Chromium-based browsers or Chrome directly, is trying to change the language of your app. Of course, that works for websites, but when you're doing apps, you might not want that. For example, in this case, the Starbucks PWA is being translated to Spanish if I change the language of my phone to Spanish. So it happens also with your standalone app. So what you can do is you can add a meta tag. That is very old, but now we can use it again to say, hey, Google, don't translate my app. And if you want to apply this only when it's an app and not it's being used in the browser, you can use a media query. So you can check if you're actually in a standalone mode or full screen in that case, and then inject that meta tag and it works. So then in the browser, you will get translation and not when you are a native app, okay, in quotes. So another user interface thing or problem or feature that on desktop, you can open multiple instances of the same app. That's not currently happening on mobile, which might be a problem or not. It depends on what you're doing. So just have that in mind, that on Windows, on macOS, on Linux, and Chromebooks, you can open multiple instances of the same app. They're all sharing the storage. Okay, so in terms of cookies, cache storage, IndexedDB, they're all sharing everything. They're also all sharing the same service worker instance. So if you want, for some reason, security or wherever, to just keep only one, you need to use some messaging APIs with the service worker, so the service worker can control that and say to some clients or some of these windows, hey, you cannot log in or you cannot work here. For example, I've seen this on banking apps, okay, that they don't want several transactions at the same time, so you cannot open also 2 tabs on the same app. Well, the same will happen here on desktop. So regarding tools, there are also new tools that you need to understand and you probably need to use. So, for example, it's normal today when you're creating PWAs that you're using a local server. It can be like even if you're using React CLIs or Create React App or Angular CLI, you're just working with localhost because you need localhost for service workers and probably web app manifest. The thing is that on iOS, because iOS has a simulator and not an emulator, that means it's not really a virtual machine, you can actually also use localhost inside the iOS simulator, and it works. But what happens with Android? So when you are using the Android emulator, that's a virtual machine. And first, there are 2 problems with the Android emulator. So if you want to try PWAs, you actually need Play Store because you need Play services. And that means you also need Chrome. So you need to check that the emulator that you are using has that Play Store icon there. If it doesn't have the icon there, then you won't be able to test PWAs. Okay, so you don't have Chrome and you don't have a way to create PWAs. So be careful with that. So also, there is a problem with the localhost, because when you're typing localhost in Android, that will search for a local server inside the stack of the Android system, not inside your host computer. And the same happens when you have an Android phone connected through a USB. So localhost doesn't work, and you can say, oh, let's use the IP address of my computer, but if you do that, it's not localhost, so it's not an exception for HTTPS. And of course, you don't have a TLS certificate for your IP address, so it doesn't work. So the solution is to use DevTools. If you open the console drawer in Chrome, DevTools, there is a section known as Remote Devices. When you go to Remote Devices, you can actually enable port forwarding. So you can say that you want to forward a port from your Android, that can be an emulator, or it can be a real Android device in debug mode through a USB, to a port to a local address. So in that case, you enable, for example, 5050 to localhost 5050, and finally, your Android emulator or your Android real device will be able to run your app. Okay, and you can test the service workers, and you can test if the web manifest is working properly to install the app. So other thing that that most people don't know is that there is a Chromebook emulator. So if you want to try the desktop experience, even now it's available also on Windows, Linux, and macOS under flag, you can actually add a Chromebook emulator and have a Pixelbook emulator inside an Android emulator. So you just need to follow a couple of tasks, and then you will have that emulator, and you can test the desktop experience for Chromebook users. And it's currently on Chrome 67, okay, which it's okay, but it's not the latest version. Also, if you want to try kaiOS for feature phones, there are some tools available. Just have in mind that we are going back a couple of years in terms of tooling and in terms of what you can do here. So it's an old version of Firefox, the one that is being used in those devices. Of course, we are talking about even devices that are not even touch. But there are some tools that you can use to package your PWA. There are some conversions that need to be made from the standards to a kaiOS, but there are some tools that you can use. Also, if you are not a Windows user, you have some free VMs from Microsoft that are available for testing that you can use to actually test now how your PWAs will work on Windows 7, 8, and Windows 10. So I think that's pretty cool. Some other important things that we need to understand when we are working with progressive web apps is the life cycle, and also something about the storage. So talking about the storage first. So the usual question that I get when I'm doing trainings on PWAs is how much storage can I use in my PWA? The answer is that it depends on the platform. For example, iOS is the most restrictive one. It has 50 megabytes per, let's say for now, per origin, per PWA. It's not exactly the definition, but just to get the rough idea. Also on Windows tablets or Windows 10 phones, it can also be 50, but it's not really common to find devices like that. And on the rest of devices, it's just a percentage of your available storage. The thing is that, and that means that, for example, in my Mac, today, a PWA can store up to, it can be around 60 gigabytes, okay, without my permission. The problem is what happens with when there is a storage pressure. So when I don't have enough space in my device. In that case, most browsers are deleting the files of your app unless you are requesting persistent storage. That API is available on Chrome and Firefox right now, and it will allow you to ask for, hey browser, please don't delete the files from my app. I need that. And they will grant you the persistent storage only on some situations. For example, if the user is currently installed the app or if it has engagement with your app. If the user is never using your app, it will never grant you that permission. And regarding the life cycle, so the first visit to a PWA happens in the browser. Okay, so the user is going to a URL in the browser. So the service worker is installed. That's the first step, to download all the resources from your app. Some events will happen there. And then the user installs the PWA. If that happens, an app installed event will be fired on the window object on some platforms. Okay, so you can track that installation there. Then the user is, let's say the user is using your app from the icon. In that case, there are two ways that you can detect that the user is actually using the icon and not the browser. One is a media query, display mode, and the other one is just playing with the URL, with the start URL. Like you can add an argument to the start URL saying, hey, I'm actually the icon in the home screen or the icon in the system and not the browser. So what happens when the app goes into the background? So the user just minimizes the app or goes to the home screen. You can use visibility change on all the platforms to know that now your app will be in the background and do something about that, such as save the state. And on iOS, your app is also terminated at that point. So when the user goes to the home screen, your app is terminated. So that means if the user goes back to your app, it will start from scratch. Always on iOS, which is a problem, okay? So on other systems, Android, Windows, Mac, Linux, and others, now we have a freeze event that we combine to the Windows, with the window object. That means your app will go to one special mode, will be hibernating. They will be probably in memory, but not executing any code. And when the user goes back to the app, if the app is still in memory, then a resume event will be fired. This is actually matching, for example, under activities lifecycle or iOS app lifecycle. So it's like matching that. And also you can use visibility change to detect that even on iOS that you are back. What happens if the app was discarded? In that case, now we have a new Boolean value. So because if the app was discarded, it's loading from scratch, the whole app. But now you have a Boolean that you can ask to the browser if it's currently a discarded app, and in that case, you can restore the previous state to match a native behavior. So we are doing these kind of things on native apps as well. Okay, so that's like an interesting life cycle, important to understand when we are working with PWAs. But working with PWAs is today sometimes challenging. There are a lot of challenges going on there. So let's start with Android. On Android today, there is something known as Web APK. I'm not sure if there is any Android native developer here, but an APK, it's basically an Android package, so it's like a native app. This is a launcher created by, let's say, Chrome for now, that creates a first-class application in the Android system. It's signed by the Play Store, which means it's installed without going to the actual Play Store, and without the user enabling any or disabling any security settings. Okay, so basically Chrome is going to the cloud. Let's say for now it's the Play Store. It's something similar to the Play Store, but it has to do with Google. It's creating an APK. It's known as the Web APK, and that APK is coming back to the device as an APK, and it's installed as an APK. That APK only has your icons and the PWA URL. It doesn't have your actual files. Okay, it's just a launcher that is launching the Chrome engine in standalone or full screen mode. But that's something that is happening today when you're working with Android. That also means that the APK can be updated. So you need to change the manifest. Let's say you change the icon, you change the app's name, you change the start URL. If the user has engagement, so if the user is actually using the app, Chrome is in the background checking if there is a new version of the manifest. And if there is a new version of the manifest with low priority, in a couple of hours or days, there is no clear algorithm here, your icon will change. Okay? Like completely invisible to the user. So you will just find a new icon, okay, a few hours later. And you can check Chrome Web APKs on Android, and you can see all the APKs that are currently installed in your Android device, and there you can actually see the latest update for that particular APK. Okay? Also, we need to, on Android, to be careful with link capturing. What is this? When you have Web APK, your app will be managing your scope. So will be the owner or responsible for your URL. So for example, I have an app here for housing.com. And if I Google anything regarding housing and I click there on Google, it goes directly to the app. But sometimes the URL that I'm pointing is not really the PWA, so it's not working. In that case, I'm stuck in one particular HTML and the back button doesn't work, nothing works. So you need to understand that when you're creating an Android PWA, it's an APK and you will be the owner for the whole, if you're using the scope of for your domain, it will be the owner of the whole domain. Every link to that domain will be open within the boundaries of your app, of your PWA, not in the browser by default. So just be careful with that when you're doing some kind of things. And the last thing I have here for fighting challenges has to do with iOS. So iOS are a problem for PWAs, probably you know that. So iOS, so 11.3 added support for iOS, but there are a lot of issues going on here. So I have here some quick examples. For example, Narendra Modi, this is the Prime Minister of India, has a PWA. So regardless that they are promoting the native app at the same time, okay, when you are opening the PWA at the top, they have some issues. For example, there are no launcher images, so you see just white screens. Also, they have a big UX issue at the bottom on iPhone 10 and now probably on the new iPads. So what's the problem? They're using the unsafe area. So you can actually not use that area for touchable elements because it doesn't work. So today, you need to go and use environment margins. Okay, that's something new that is available on iOS for these devices and also for notch-based devices. Okay, adding the viewport feed and using this, then you will be safe when you're doing these things. And this is also Android compatible for notch-based Android devices. Okay, but you need to actually do this because if not, you will have those UX issues. Another issue, for example, on Twitter, is that because of that problem of reload, I cannot use the Twitter app in my iPhone because I have two-factor authentication. So when I log in, I need to go to the Messages app and get an SMS code. And when I go back to the app, it's starting from scratch. So there is no place to actually paste the code. I need to start again, and that means another code. So it doesn't work. Okay, so it has a problem. So you need to restore the state if you want to do this. And it's possible, but no one is doing that, unfortunately. Another big issue on iOS, for example, is on Uber. The Uber PWA is pretty good. It's pretty fast. Okay, it's one of the best PWAs out there. But on iOS, it's completely useless. So you can search for an Uber. You can try it. Okay, try it on. You need to go to m.uber.com. But the problem is that when you select continue, you need to log in. And the login happens in a different domain. And because it's a different domain, it's out of the scope, it goes to the browser. You log in the browser, but they're using one storage that is not shared with the PWA. So when you go back to the PWA, you're still logged out. And you are logged out forever. Okay? So these are issues on iOS that we can blame Apple. Yeah, we can blame Apple. But also, you need to do something on your own, okay, to create a better experience. There are solutions for that out there, some hacks if you want, but it's something that you need to create. So also there are problems with icons and launch images, okay, that I don't want to get deep today, but there are many problems. The last thing that I want to show you for new challenges here is a new responsive. Today you have kaiOS. With kaiOS, we are talking about no-touch devices and viewports that, for example, are 240 pixels. So it's really small. So how's your website on that viewport? Also, the Apple Watch now has support for web browsing. And you have new viewports that are going on. Really small. So we need to actually create a mini mode for our app. Like when you have a very small viewport, you need to have a mini mode. And the same happens on desktop. Today on desktop, you can actually resize the window as small as you want. So these are a lot of new challenges that we need to understand. So how is your website in that size? Okay, really small. So we need to actually do something new. We have new challenges to create really good user experiences. So as you can see, PWAs are great. Okay, we can create really good experiences for a lot of use cases where a native app is probably expensive and probably will be an abandoned app that no one is going to update and no users will use that app. But, okay, let's use a critical eye. Let's try to push vendors to improve the experience. And also you need to do an extra effort to create a really good user experience. So test as much as possible so you can find those issues and try to find a workaround to every issue. And remember our goals, that are pretty simple. So we need a good, accessible, and performant user experience. That's all. That's our goal. Okay, so that's what you need when you're creating PWAs. So that's all I have for you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the very interesting talk, Max.